IQ under 70, when the group was the survival strategy. The most important cognitive ability in human history wasn't reasoning, it wasn't memory, it wasn't problem solving. It was knowing who in the group was about to turn on you. For 95% of human evolutionary history, individual cognitive performance mattered less than group membership. Expulsion meant death. Staying required reading the room constantly. Who's angry? Who's calm? Who's shifting alliances? Social accuracy kept you alive. IQ below 70 is largely the result of genetic conditions, developmental complications, or brain injury, not a selected trait. But when fast analytical processing isn't the primary tool, attentiveness to emotional cues develops more strongly. Tone, expression, behavioral shifts, harder to measure than IQ, which is partly why it gets ignored. If you know someone in this range, you've probably seen it. They read a room before anyone else does. They know something is wrong before anyone says a word. That accuracy had survival value. The group was the cognitive prosthetic. The people who held it together felt every shift, every tension, every crack before it opened. But group survival has a hidden cost that shows up in the next range, and it's about calories. Borderline and low average, the cheapest brain that still worked. You've probably met someone in this range and thought, not fast, but they never seem to break down. That's not coincidence. That's architecture. Imagine two people walking into winter. Same group, same food supply, same cold. One brain burns through fuel fast. The other stretches what it has. Come spring, one of them is still there. The brain uses 20% of the body's energy while weighing 2% of its mass. A brain in the IQ 70 to 89 range doesn't recruit the same neural networks as one running at 120. In environments where food disappeared for months, that gap mattered more than reasoning speed. About 20% of the population falls here. It's the cognitive profile that kept functioning when more expensive brains became a liability. Your brain isn't slow, it was built to last. Which raises the question, if intelligence costs this much, why did evolution keep pushing it upward? The answer sits exactly in the middle of the distribution. Average. Why evolution stopped here? If higher intelligence is so useful, why does the average sit at 100 and stay there? 50% of the population has an IQ between 90 and 109. That number has stayed roughly constant for thousands of years, not by accident. It's a ceiling evolution chose. Bigger brains need more food, develop more slowly, and at higher ranges increase vulnerability to psychiatric conditions. The answer evolution landed on: generalist, mid-range, efficient. A brain here handles social complexity, practical problem solving, language, and spatial reasoning well enough for almost every human environment, without the psychiatric costs that appear at higher ranges. Most US presidents fall here, most surgeons, most people who built every stable institution humans have created. That's not a knock, that's the point. Evolutionary biologists call this balancing selection. A group following the same river north every spring for 30 generations didn't need fast processing. Reliable pattern recognition was enough. During the Ice Age, high-calorie burning brains became a liability. When food was scarce for years, the middle range persisted because it was durable. You're the configuration evolution stress-tested the longest? The band just above it survived for a different reason. Not intelligence alone, but what happens when other people need to follow. High average, the insight that actually lands. The smartest person in the room is often the least useful one. Not because intelligence doesn't matter, but because an idea that stays inside one head changes nothing. Carnegie Mellon researcher Anita Woolley found that teams with higher individual IQs didn't automatically outperform. What predicted collective performance was whether members could read each other, where information moved, not just where intelligence sat. IQ 110 to 119 sits at that intersection. You're the person everyone asks to check their work, run the meeting, explain the plan. Not because you're the fastest thinker, because what you understand, other people can follow. The aqueducts, the legal codes, the trade routes, built by people who could think clearly and explain it to whoever was next to them. If this is your range, you're the person who gets things done and gets others moving. The insight that lands beats the insight that never leaves your head. Push past that, and the speed that makes you useful starts making you difficult, superior. Useful in small numbers, costly in large ones. There's a specific feeling this range knows, the conversation moving too slowly. The answer obvious. while everyone else is still setting up the problem. You stop yourself from finishing other people's sentences. Most of the time, groups that had a few members at IQ 120 to 129 solved problems the rest couldn't reach. Groups with too many had coordination problems nobody planned for. At this processing speed, you reach conclusions before others finish forming the question, and that gap costs you. A Journal of Applied Psychology study of 379 leaders found IQ up to around 120 correlated positively with effectiveness. Above that, it reversed. Too far ahead, and the gap between what you see and what others can act on becomes the bottleneck. That's why this range holds at roughly 10%. Higher career performance, but not higher life satisfaction. Worth sitting with that. The brain that processes faster pays a social price. Learning to stay in the room, not just be right, is the work this range has to do. At the next level, even that gets harder. Gifted. The brain that wouldn't let go. The brain that won't release a problem is rarely comfortable to live with. In 1347, when plague reached Sicily, the physicians who kept studying it after everyone else gave up were difficult to be around. They were also the ones who mapped how it spread. A survey of 3,715 Mensa members found anxiety disorders in 20%, double the national rate. Ruth Karpinski called it the hyperbrain/hyperbody effect. The same architecture enabling deep pattern recognition amplifies everything else. Louder sounds feel louder. Social friction feels sharper. You walk into a crowded room, and it costs more than it should. If this is you, you know the exhaustion of a brain that won't switch off. That wiring isn't a flaw. It's what keeps running when everyone else has stopped. Evolution kept this range rare because most environments didn't need it. But when the known routes stopped working, a brain that kept running through possibilities others had abandoned was sometimes the only tool that worked. In a genuine crisis, that fixation was the difference between an answer and the group not surviving long enough to need one. The cost doesn't disappear when the crisis does. It stays. That's the deal this range makes, and most people in it never chose it consciously. At the far end of the distribution, even that logic breaks down. Exceptionally gifted, the tail that pays its own price. Roughly 1 in 1,000 people scores above 140. Evolution didn't plan for this. It's what falls out at the far end of a distribution kept wide enough to occasionally produce something unprecedented. The architecture itself is different, not just faster. Parallel processing. Connections drawn across domains most brains never link. Newton invented calculus because existing mathematics couldn't describe what he was seeing. Ramanujan mailed results from Madras that Cambridge mathematicians took years to verify, arrived at through a process he couldn't reconstruct himself. Ordinary conversations feel like arriving before the other person has left the house. Scheduling a dentist appointment can require the same effort as a complex problem. The brain built for one has no gear for the other. If you're here, you've probably felt it. The world running on a frequency you can hear but can't quite tune into. A genuine mismatch between the hardware and the environment. This range isn't evolution's goal. It's the tale of a distribution that had to stay wide enough to occasionally produce something the rest couldn't. Every time a group faced a problem that resisted every known solution, the answer, when it came from the far end. Evolution tolerated the cost because the payoff was irreversible. Every range on this list paid a price to be here. The one that reads rooms. The one that outlasted famine. The one that gets others moving. The one that won't let go of the problem. None of them chose it. All of them carried it. And the body holding that brain was built by the same process, same trade-offs, different system.